Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here for the Gandhara Independent Film Festival's Empowering Women panel discussion. By way of introduction, my name is Gayatri Bajpai, and I'm a writer-director based in Vancouver and Los Angeles. And I'm so very happy to have a range of experiences in this group of panelists, including filmmakers who produce, write, direct, and edit. As we all know, the situation of women filmmakers in various industries across the world is undergoing paradigm shifts of different kinds. But this panel will explore just how much of that change is reflected in our experiences on the ground and what we anticipate for the future of women filmmakers, as well as what still needs to change badly. So to introduce our amazing panelists, first up, Lisette Montesino. She's a New York-based producer who specializes in bringing together talented crew members to provide unique content for TV, film, commercials, and music videos. She produced her first feature film when she was just 28 years old. And from there, she went on to work on various projects all over the world, including More, a feature film that was shot in Pakistan and went on to be selected for the Oscar longlist in 2015. Next up, we have Safia Zafar Osmani, an Emmy-nominated filmmaker who works on creating socially motivated content to foster discourse on the rights of marginalized individuals. She uses her work to explore the concept of identity, how it's shaped and correlated to one's status in society. Having worked in half a dozen countries over the last few years, Safia has immense exposure in the international market, in addition to maintaining an impressive understanding of stories from Pakistan. She is a Fulbright alumna and holds an MFA in filmmaking. Cecilia Albertini is an Italian director and writer from Milan and is based in LA. She has an eclectic portfolio of award-winning documentaries, narrative shorts, and branded content work. She graduated with an MFA in film, in writing and directing and producing, from UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television, which is where we met. And her work ranges from heartfelt dramas and dark comedies to socially relevant documentaries, often featuring strong-willed but marginalized women who fight the system. Her work has been featured on RAI Cinema Channel and KCET, as well as the LA Film Festival, Urban World Film Festival, and Holly Shorts. So once again, thank you all for being here. Very excited to talk to you today. And to start off, I think it would be great if we went around and talked a little bit about our own work. What made you gravitate towards your main role in filmmaking, whether that be producing, directing, writing, editing, etc.? And what early experiences in your career were formative in getting you to that point? So if we could start here, I'll pick on you guys one by one, like we're in a classroom. Safia, how about we start with you?
Perfect. Yeah, sure. I like to call myself a storyteller. And I think I've been a storyteller since as long as I remember. I think the first time I actively remember telling stories was probably when I was 10, when I started, writing for newspapers and just, talking about power outage that we used to have in our neighborhoods, or just like, food and everything, right? So that's my first memory, but my mom can probably, talk about when I was younger than that. So that's why I've always called myself a storyteller. In terms of professionally choosing this field, it really started when I was in my undergraduate program, and we had this an opportunity that came up in Pakistan, where we were told there were these British filmmakers who were coming to Pakistan, and they're going to select 12 students from entire country to tell stories of Pakistan, right? And my entire class applied for it, and I was told, probably I found out about it at the very last minute. I was like, I'm just going to apply for it anyway. The deadline was passed over, and then I did. And I got selected. And so I think that is where I really thought, no, not even that. I was just excited, that I'm selected. This is prestigious, and I'm going to be, learning from these international filmmakers, first time ever in my life. And then we made films, and out of all of those films, 4 films were selected to actually go in the London International Documentary Film Festival. This is, I'm talking 2009, if I'm not wrong. And my film was selected on those 4 films, right? I was just trying to learn and have fun with my filmmaking. just, learning how to use the camera, just going out in the, on the streets, filming with people, talking to all of the people, just that. But when my film was selected among those 4 films from all over Pakistan, and then I was asked to travel to London for the first time ever in my life at the age of what, 21 maybe? That is when I was like, wait a minute, this can happen? I can travel the world, meet all these new people, and tell the stories, that I want to. It took me years to figure out what kind of stories I want to tell. But I think that is where it all started: acknowledgement, appreciation, and just being seen. I think that is where it started for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think one of the lessons there is to take a chance on putting yourself out there, which is something I think we're not always taught to do as women. And then I predict that a pattern we'll see between all of us was that some of those early experiences were with somebody giving us that first bit of validation that we really need. And it'll be interesting to see how journeys develop from there. Thank you, Safia. Cece, how about you?
Yeah, I think everything started a bit like Safia. Since I was little, I've always loved writing and just storytelling. And I used to just write stories as a kid. But I also really liked acting and I liked performing very much. And I used to just watch so many movies and TV like all the time. I'm an only child, so I didn't have many like siblings to play with. So I think that film was like my big companion growing up. And so I knew I wanted to have a career in film. But for me, it was just like so hard to reach. I mean, I grew up in Milan, and obviously Hollywood couldn't be further from there. And it's a city where most people have very serious jobs. They're lawyers, or they work in banks, or stuff that was much more sensible and just logical. I didn't know any artists growing up. I didn't know anybody who made a living with art. And so it was just such an abstract thought that I would just go and start this creative career. But luckily, my parents were supportive, and they understood that that's what I wanted to do. And I started with acting actually in my country. And when I was very young, right after high school. And it was an interesting experience. I really liked acting, but I felt like I was missing something whenever, I worked on feature films and TV shows, and I had some very good opportunities and I was very lucky, but I always felt like I needed more control. I wanted to be a part of the creative process of creating a character. And I think that part of my discontent came also from the female characters that were available to us actresses were very limited, and they were mostly written by men. And they just didn't reflect. I didn't think they reflected really the female experience very well. And yeah, I didn't see myself in them. So I wasn't satisfied and decided I want to actually go behind the camera and try and tell my stories and create and be more of a creator. And so then the decision to come to the States was kind of connected with that, because in Italy we don't really have an undergraduate program for filmmaking. And so I had to go abroad if I wanted to study that. And I've always loved the US and I love the culture here. And so I think that coming here and doing filmmaking was really what taught me to just believe in my own ideas much more and not be afraid of judgment and what other people are going to say and stuff like that. So yeah, for me, my path into filmmaking is very much connected to my path of moving to a different country, which is the United States. And so, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, knowing your path is definitely connected to that move, but it's also good to find out how you chose to go from acting to authorship in a different way, which is something I want to get more into later on. But first, let's hear from Lizette.
Thank you. So I actually really enjoyed hearing everyone's stories. I found that we all have like a thread that bonds us, and it comes from storytelling and the seeking of performance, or at least starting out in performance. I'm a daughter of immigrants, and a lot of times growing up, I felt like the American dream to aspire to do something more than what our families did before us was like a constant message that I kept having instilled in me, but the lack of communication with some language barriers made it somewhat difficult at first, which turned my mother towards pushing me towards acting. So I also had a beginning in performance, which actually helped me find my voice and find a way to vocalize more of what I was feeling inside and put it out there in a format which was through storytelling. So I found that very fascinating, that we're all kind of relating in that sense to performance. And I took it on further to find some interest in theater and find some role models to kind of seek after to see what more I could pursue in regards to filmmaking and storytelling, and what kind of path I could follow in regards to that. And I know that once I got past the performance aspect of it, I realized that I really had a deep interest in wanting to tell not just my personal stories, but the stories of other people. As I mentioned before, my family is a family of immigrants. They have so many stories that I've heard over the years. And there are so many people with so many different experiences and so many different social aspects to their experiences that I felt a strong connection to wanting to make sure that their stories are also told. And whether that's in a fictional or non-fictional method, I found myself gravitating towards that, just wanting to be sure that I could help find a way to make sure all those stories are heard out there.
Yeah, while we're on that topic, do you guys feel that you gravitate towards certain types of stories in particular? And if so, why? Where does that come from? One thing I'm interested in talking about is whether there are types of stories that women filmmakers make, or whether that is a stereotype. And if you could speak a little bit to that range of experiences in your work, maybe since you've talked about the immigrant experience, especially Lizette, why don't we start with you? If you could talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, yes. So I feel like that a lot of times some of the best stories, I remember having a teacher tell me once, like, some of the best stories that you could write or tell come from personal experiences, because no one's going to tell your story better than you can. And sometimes even when you're trying to tell someone else's story, I find myself always kind of finding some cathartic relation to somebody else's story to help me be able to make sure that it's told to the best of capability so that everyone can try to find a way to relate. So I know I tend to gravitate towards stories that I find are helping people in a way better their lives, or maybe become more reflective about not just their lives, but what's going on with other people and their stories and their experiences. And I know that for the most part, I work in the commercial and the marketing industry, but even in that respect, if there's a way or a product or something that I can try to make sure is helping society or helping people connect, at least relationally in an emotional aspect, then I want to make sure that we capture that somehow, or that we help the storyteller, the director, the art director, the actors connect in that way so that the audiences can connect with the different stories that are being told out there.
So stories that increase empathy is a fair way to describe what you gravitate to. Yes.
Yes. Definitely.
How about you, Safia? Is that your experience? And what types of stories have you been drawn to?
I agree with a lot of things that Lizette said there. Um, but when it comes to my journey as a storyteller, and I'm going to talk the professional journey now, not when I was 10 years old. I come from Pakistan, a developing country. And when I got into, when I was in my undergrad, it was around very close to that, 9/11 had happened, right? And I was in Pakistan. So we somehow felt this burden culturally as a society as well to tell the counter narrative, to what was being shown on, let's say, international media, right? So somewhere the individual capacity of a storyteller was to be, sidelined for XYZ reasons. And there were so many reasons, right? But now when I reflect back upon it, even like the first time I did this workshop and we told these stories, it wasn't like, now I think about it, it wasn't like a blank canvas that I could pick whatever story I wanted to talk about, right? It wasn't like I wanted to talk about my aspirations to become an actor, or it wasn't like I could talk about painting. It was, I had to pick a story of social change. And in that bracket, at that point in Pakistan, social change meant, oh, look, we're not terrorists. So we have to tell those stories, right? So it was almost like being pushed in that box to tell just that kind of story. And it continued, not just for me, for a lot of us, for a very long time. So now, after over a decade in the business, I, took an active break from all of that. And I started thinking, because even what happens now in Pakistan is that we don't have a lot of funding to be telling whatever stories we want to tell, right? And then if we need funding, we have to look at other countries, at the West. But then we all know as filmmakers, funding does not come like with no strings attached. It comes with certain agendas, it comes with certain, goals. So again, somehow we find ourselves circling around the same narrative of, being in the counter narrative. And when you are in the counter narrative, when do you get to take the center stage as a narrative telling storytellers, right? So now I started thinking about that as of past couple of years, and what Lizette said, I would echo with that. Now I think a lot about, my personal experiences of my friends and family, and I want to kind of get into that now. It might sound very not politically correct as well if I talk like that and people would hear me say this. I'm sick of telling everyone, oh, we're not terrorists. I'm sick of bringing, the misery porn to everyone because they want to look at Pakistan or the developing countries, through a certain lens. Yes, we have issues. I agree with that. And I feel that on daily levels. But we have so many other stories as well. So somewhere the storyteller in me feels like, I need to break out of that kind of cage that I may not necessarily dislike to tell those stories, but that's why the, importance of identity. I don't want this identity to be imposed on me as a storyteller to be only talking about certain things. There's so much more I want to talk about, and they as well have universal attraction to them. So I think that is the space now I'm thinking about a lot personally.
You brought up a really good point about narratives and counter narratives and how, just in reacting to the dominant narrative, so much of your career had been shaped. And I feel like for, people of diverse backgrounds in general, whether it's due to being a person of color, due to being an international filmmaker, seeking funding from different countries, or due to the fact that you're a woman, you are often put not necessarily in an activist box, but in a box where you have to say something about an issue that has something to do with who you are. Whereas you might want to do something personal, as you talked about, or you might want to do something that isn't based on you at all, something where you identify the emotional core of it, but it's not, a specific issue related to your own life. So maybe we can talk a bit more about that, in the rest of the conversation. I want to know more about whether you guys have felt pressure to be a representative of some cause in your filmmaking. But before we get into more detail, Cece, if you could talk a little bit about the same topic.
Yeah, I mean, what Safia said was, and both of you, Lizette too, like, it's just so interesting to hear that I'm not alone in going through very similar thoughts, even though we're so different, have such different backgrounds, and in Safia's case, live in different countries. But definitely I saw myself very much in what you were saying, obviously from a different point of view, but I also definitely felt the pressure as a female filmmaker, immigrant filmmaker, Italian filmmaker. There's definitely certain expectations that I don't know how much of them I'm imagining them and putting them on myself, or they actually exist, and I am still figuring that out. But I think that as far as stories that I gravitate towards, I do definitely naturally gravitate more towards a female-driven narratives, for sure. Just because it's my personal experience, and I just identify more with women, and I also just want to see more women on the screen after watching so many films with mostly male protagonists. So I am happy to, even if there is like an external pressure to do that, I definitely am happy to go along with it, because it's really what I have at heart. But I think that within female characters and the characters that we are allowed to write as women, I think there is still definitely like certain boundaries that we have to work within, and there's a lot of resistance towards, I think, women that are not like as morally just perfect as we want them to be, or women that are unlikable. Like, I want to see more of that, and I want to write more of that, and I enjoy writing women, like I said, like Gayatri read in my description, at the edge of society in some way, because I think that these women exist, and there's some like messy women that have issues, women that, we've seen some of them, but I think we can see more of them, and I think we need to see more of them, and it helps create more empathy towards women that are not just like being quiet and saying yes to everything and pleasing other people all the time. Yeah, so I think that I feel like that's what I want to write. And but yeah, I agree that like there is definitely an expectation. I don't think there's an expectation from me to like necessarily write stories about Italian immigrants in particular, but there is an expectation of, you should be writing something that, like, something close to your own identity, whatever that means, So I don't know, I feel conflicted about that. I think, we should feel free to write whatever we want. And if we do decide to write about a different culture, obviously that isn't, a culture that isn't ours, we need to do the research and make sure that we know what we're talking about. But at the same time, I don't think we should put so many limitations on what's allowed.
Especially when we're following, about 100 years of at least Hollywood history of dudes writing whatever they want about any culture and any gender. You raised a couple interesting points, one of which is what type of female character gets depicted. And I think in recent years, there's been a little bit of a shift from, certain types of love interest roles to, the stoner female, the loser. For a while there was this obsession with the strong woman. And I think even that has thankfully started to move a little bit away from that, where she doesn't have to be the perfect strong woman either. Maybe she's weak and vulnerable, but also, imperfect in lots of other ways. So what I did want to ask you, I want to shift a little bit to your specific careers and your way of working. What is your leadership style in your primary role as a filmmaker? Would that be director, producer? You know, I know that some of you sometimes edit. So how do you tend to relate to your crew, to your collaborators, and how has that worked out for you? Anyone can jump in here.
I'll jump in. I've worked my way up down the production path. I started off as a PA. I've moved on up, scaled up the ladder, produced a bunch of commercials, worked on a couple of features, and now I work as the head of production at a company. So when it comes to leadership skills and how I've had to relate with different crew, I've always tried to take, and maybe this is very telling of me, and I'm just realizing, I've always tried to take a very empathetic approach where I am trying my best to listen to what it is my crew needs. And from a production standpoint, as much as I would love to just give the director or give the DP whatever he wants, sometimes compromises need to be made. So I'm always trying to have an ear out to listen in regards to what might be needed, up until what point are certain elements going to be needed, where can we cut to still not lose the creative craft that is trying to be displayed in front of the camera, but where we can still make ends meet on the budgetary side. But I always see it as it's a collaborative effort. And yes, I'm in a leadership role for the most part as a producer, and especially now as head of production, but I see it as we're always working with a team. And so we always need to be able to listen to outside voices, because you never know where a good idea is going to come from. And if we all want to have that end product be a good product, no one's really truly trying to work against each other. We're just trying to have the same end goal of having a product that the audience is going to enjoy and that we're all going to be proud of. So those are my takes on leadership.
Absolutely. That sounds great. I'm wondering, do you tend to find that that's contagious? Does the team rally around that? And if not, have you ever had folks who have a different style when it comes to, say, a director or a DP, and how have you dealt with that?
I wish I could say it's always contagious, but there will be moments where you just can't meet eye to eye, and you'll just have somebody that's not wanting to budge. And in those instances, sometimes it takes a little more finessing. It just takes longer conversations, and it takes hearing them out too. Sometimes I think the people who are being the most stubborn or like holding fast to what it is that they want have not fully figured out how, like, an alternative. Sometimes we grasp on so tightly to that baby that you don't want to be destroyed, but you haven't really realized what it is that you really need. And it takes a longer conversation, and it just takes listening to that other person to try to figure out, like, what is at the core of what it is that you want. You say you think you want, but what is at the core of it that you actually will need to make this scene successful, this commercial successful, this conversation with the client to make sure we deliver properly successful. Sometimes once the conversations keep being had, you start to realize what's at the core of what you're going to actually need to be able to basically provide successfully what it is to the client, to the film studio, to even just another crew member. So I guess in moments of conflict, I feel like it, at least from my end, it just takes patience. Takes patience and listening, a lot of listening, and just trying to remind the other person and myself, like, we're on the same team.
So you actually lean harder into collaboration and cooperation. Interesting. Safia, how about you?
I do think that, storytelling or filmmaking is a very democratic process. But having said that, I've been working as a director, writer, producer, right? So really it all begins on the writing table. So there is this kind of, you feel possessive about things, right? But with experience, you learn how to let go a little. In terms of work ethics, in terms of bringing a positive attitude, I really like to lead by example on my sets. Whether it's a commercial, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a short fiction, whatever it is, it's imperative that whoever's coming on my set has that, we're going to make it happen attitude. No matter what happens, we're going to make it. That is something that I do not compromise at. But the democracy, that bit comes in the creative, flow of the entire idea. As long as we're holding on to the crux, the nucleus, all ideas are welcome. In fact, all ideas are appreciated, right? I also believe in a collaborative process because at the end of the day, it's teamwork. It's not any one person's job to get the film made, to get the product made. So I personally do not even like to take the entire credit, once the thing is done, as, oh, I'm the only person who got it done. No, there is a team that makes things happen, whether that's the driver on set, right? Whether that's the cook that's getting your food ready for your shoot, whether it's your line producer, whether it's your art director, whether it's even, the characters that are basically on set in the case of documentaries, or actors on set in case of commercials or short fiction. There's so many parts to this engine, right? So even though as a director, and as a producer, I like to, make sure that everyone is believing that this thing happened, and ownership is everyone's believing that they own it. Apart from that, all ideas are welcome. And I have realized this, that, I'm a perfectionist. So when on paper, I like to have everything to the T. But then once all of that is ready, I let it all go. When I'm on my set, I let all of that go because it has been absorbed. Now it can go, and that is where the magic really happens, Gayatri. That's what I've realized. When we're on set, we know what we need. Then, the whole creative process of everyone, collaborating, that starts happening. Sometimes some things come up that you weren't even imagining. And that is even more magical and beautiful than what you had imagined to begin with, right? So that is the space that I like to work in.
Absolutely, yeah. Walking on set with a good plan as a director, I think, is key, but then being willing to throw it to the wind and see what your collaborators can bring that's actually better than what you'd thought of is sometimes the way to go. And I think it really runs counter to this idea of the director in particular as a dictator, which is, an old Hollywood idea of just like this guy who yells at people or makes them do stuff they're uncomfortable with, but at the end of the day, the film is great and it's worth it. And I'm interested in whether that's a trend among women directors is really leading into how much this is a collaboration, even when maybe a lot of directors in the past haven't been willing to admit that. Or whether, maybe I'm generalizing too much and CC is a total dictator on set. I guess we'll find out in a second here. CC, what's your leadership style?
Yeah, I know. Definitely, I'm not the dictator at all. I think I completely agree with both of you ladies. Like, I really like the idea of collaboration, and I am all for it. And I am, if somebody, when I'm on set, has a suggestion, sometimes suggestions come from the most unexpected places. On my last shoot, the script supervisor actually had a great suggestion for a shot that I hadn't thought of. And I was like, yes, let's do it. You're right. This could be a great shot. And then I take all the credit because I'm the director. No, I mean, kind of, but at the same time, I think it is a very collaborative process, and I love hearing suggestions. In every stage of my project, obviously there is a limit to that, and you have to preserve those boundaries and and not get too confused by a million suggestions, because then you lose the crux of what you're making, you lose track of really the story you're telling. But I think with experience, you start to learn how to only parse out and take like the right suggestions, the right contributions, and leave the rest out. But I think that one of the big powers that we have when we are directors, and we are able, not always, but sometimes we're able to choose our collaborators on set. I think that's such a key part of the process, because choosing the right people for your project is like 90% of the job. It's so important to have the right people. And you know, whenever something went wrong with the collaborator on set, because we didn't get along or there was, you know, misunderstandings, I felt like, you know what, at the end of the day, it was my responsibility. I shouldn't have chosen this person to work on this film, and I did, you know. So it always comes down to the director, when, you know, when the director is able to choose, to just find the right people. And it doesn't mean that, you know, there are people that are wrong necessarily, but they're wrong maybe to work with you or to work on that project. And you have to be able to recognize that and find your people is a big thing.
Right. So to continue this train of thought regarding collaboration, and I like how Safia put it, that there's this nucleus, and as long as everybody understands that nucleus, you know, we've all talked a little bit about how your collaboration style can then become very cooperative and more democratic.
Just on that note, sorry, Gayatri.
Go.
I have noticed sometimes women, you know, because they're expected socially, culturally, you know, just trained to be, you know, good women, nice women. What is a good woman on set? What is a good woman in the society, right? One who smiles and says, okay, yeah, this is fine, you know, harmless. Sometimes as women filmmakers, we have to remind ourselves consciously that, for the lack of a better term, dictatorship is sometimes needed, right, on the set as well. Because at the end of the day, if you're a director, if you're a producer, if you're leading the team, it is your responsibility when, you know, there are 10 different opinions and you don't have enough time, right, to basically just entertain all of those opinions. There are big budgets involved. There is not a lot of time. There are people involved. You have to put your foot down and make that call, as opposed to just being concerned about, oh, this person is going to think you're bossy. Oh, this person is going to think you're not taking any opinions. No, at the end of the day, you know, the buck stops at you and you will be held responsible for the product. It is your product, so the ownership has to be taken when it's needed to be taken.
Right, absolutely. And I think CC raised this point as well, that at the end of the day, you know, you're the one who should take either the credit or the responsibility, depending on how things go. And, you know, I think Lizette is also speaking to that. It's just how you get there can vary. What would you guys say has been your experience? Especially, I'm interested in whether you've had male collaborators who have pushed back against that or not. You know, it's totally possible that you've always had completely cooperative collaborators, but in general, you know, we hear a lot from actresses, especially, who've had different experiences with male producers, male directors in positions of power. If you have had to answer to someone in your capacity as a director or producer, how have you dealt with that type of conflict? Or conversely, have you had good experiences? Fill us in a little bit on that.
I can start. Yeah, I think it's very tricky. I've had a lot of great male collaborators, and I've been very lucky, but I also am very choosy. I'm just very picky whenever, in general, with collaborators, and but especially with men. One of like the biggest relationships on set is the director and the DP, right? And I have worked with several male DPs, and with them, I've mostly had great experiences. But I think that whenever I choose them, when I choose a male DP collaborator, for example, I want to make sure that there isn't that male ego thing, because I can see it coming, right? Like if I sense that a little bit of resistance, you know, in the very first conversations, creative conversations that we have, if I start, I'm not saying I don't want any kind of pushback or input from people. I'm far, like, obviously I do, but it's how it's delivered that makes a difference. And you have to be very good at like get all the subtleties behind what a person is saying, and thinking, is this person going to push back, and is this person going to try to impose their own like vision or their own whatever they want to do over what I want. And if I sense even just a little bit of that, I don't want to work with that person, guy or woman. Like it can happen with both genders, obviously, we're all human, but obviously I think it happens more with male collaborators. As a result, I've ended up working with some great male collaborators that I chose and that were very respectful, and they always gave me their input, but it was never with that like arrogance of like, I know better than you anyway, and you're just a woman, which can happen too. And it has happened to me, definitely.
Yeah, conflict is part of the process, right? The creative
Yes.
process, and disagreeing, even when you're first in those early stages of pre-production or development, will happen. But I think it's key that you trust your gut and learn to recognize the signs of implicit bias that maybe that person isn't even aware of themselves. You know, I think that's the key, is knowing when you're onto something and not questioning that instinct too much, because then you might find yourself on set, you know, having, like Safia was talking about earlier, it's down to the wire and you're having this disagreement where somebody just doesn't want to do your bidding, and then it is your responsibility. How about you, Lizette? You did speak a little bit earlier to conflict in the creative process. Have you specifically noticed any patterns when you work with male collaborators, or have you had the fortune of, you know, mostly decent runs?
I wish I could say they were all always positive experiences, but as I was listening to both of you talk, you mentioned how sometimes some of our experiences, we may not even be aware of the biases. And I definitely think while coming up through the ranks, there were definitely moments of biases that were put out there that in that moment, younger version me was just like, in passing, like, it's okay. Like an AD just simply saying, no, you go talk to that person because you're a woman and you just have a sweeter face and you can have them get to do your bidding because you're a woman. Or having a guy say, because you're a woman, you're more organized, so you'll be able to handle the coordination of certain tasks better because that's just your natural ability. These are things that in those moments, at those times, seemed like nothing, but older me, more experienced me, is now kind of looking back at those moments, wishing I would have maybe spoken up for myself differently. And now in instances where those moments of conflicts do come up with male collaborators, I do remind myself that I have experience, I've been there, I am your equal, and what is coming out of my mouth, my ideas are coming from a place of experience. So they should have equal merit to whatever it is that you have to say. And this moment of conflict has nothing to do with you are a male and I'm a female. There is conflict, and if there's a conflict dealing with the shoot and the project, let's figure that out. Let's find a solution and work towards a solution in that regards. But I do feel that now, at the very least, I try to make sure that if any man brings up anything like that AD or that other client, that I try to make sure that I speak up for myself more in that regards. because again, like, it's not always easy. And then there's other male figures that are just completely fine. Male collaborators that just get it. They work with you, they listen to your ideas, they want to be inclusive with everybody. But the ones that are not the most open collaborators, I honestly don't think they're even aware of what it is that they're saying. And they're not going to be unless we say something and we stand up for ourselves and we tell them, like, you know what? That guy over there could also easily talk to that guy. It has nothing to do with a woman and a friendly face. Some gentlemen have equally friendly faces to be able to accomplish the task at hand. So I'd like to hope that we can help keep speaking out for ourselves on set so that it becomes more known that, like, certain things should not be acceptable, or certain ways of talking to people should not be acceptable on set.
It's a very personal act to do that, and it's important to your experience as an artist or a filmmaker or producer, but it's also inevitably political, right? Because you saying that in that moment leads to him having to think twice before he does it again. You're kind of educating the person. But you know, it's interesting that you saw the positive, the compliment for what it was, which is, oh, you're, you know, as a woman, you can do this thing that's going to be within your power because you're, you know, you seem sweet or whatever. It's actually a cop-out, really. It's like, well, you know, go do this work that I don't want to do, or you're a really good organizer. These are all ways of saying, I think this is not my area, or I don't have time for this right now. It's, again, as you said, even if they're not fully aware that that's what's behind it, that's kind of what's happening. So good to hear that your reactions have evolved. I think it's really a learning experience. And like you said, having had a lot of experience usually puts us in a position to be able to say that, because I'm guessing that most of us here started out not feeling comfortable taking those stands, unless we've been lucky enough to have always had that confidence. But especially within this industry, I feel like that was very learned for me, and I'm much more in a position to do that now. Speaking of industries, have you guys noticed in your industry of choice, you know, some of us are very much in the LA Hollywood system, some of us on the East Coast, and, you know, Safia, you and I have experience of South Asian culture, and you have experience of many different industries, actually. Have you noticed that there are paradigm shifts in the way, in the status of female filmmakers in your industry? Or do you feel like, you know, those are oversold at the moment? Are there specific changes you think still need to happen? Some general observations or even anecdotes from personal experience would be great. Safia, why don't we start with you?
Sorry, I want to first, something that you just said earlier before this question, you were talking about confidence, and that reminded me of a very good story. And if you allow, I'm just going to share that, because that, you know, resonates with a lot of things that Lizette said and even Sissy said. I think I was 14 and I saw this ad in a newspaper. You know, they were looking for a newscaster. And I just wanted to, you know, do things because, you know, I was one of those students who would be on the stage every day on the school for one reason or another. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to this television channel and, you know, talk to the CEO. So I pick up the phone and directly call the channel. And I guess those days we used to be luckier than today. And I was put in touch directly with the CEO. And I obviously, you know, I was like, I would like to, you know, apply for this job. And they were like, okay, come XYZ date. And I reached that. He saw me and he goes like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to be 14. I thought you would be, you know, whatever XYZ age. I am really impressed by your confidence. And what I would say is, you know, at least finish your 10th grade, 11th grade, and then come back to me. And it was a great conversation, great meeting, everything. And right before I was about to leave, he, you know, stopped me and he was like, and when you come back in 10 years, you know, I just want to see if you are still maintaining the same kind of confidence that you have right now. And that was weird for me, right? Because nobody had said that to me. And this is, just a response to what you asked earlier about, the difference of treatment we can get, from male counterparts or female counterparts, right? And the answer is so complex, Gayatri. It's not just a gender thing. It is also a gender thing, but not just a gender thing. And I think it was that point onwards I became very conscious that I'm going to hold on to this confidence. Are they expecting me to lose this in 10 years? Are they expecting me to not step up for myself in 10 years? Why? Why is that? I didn't know the answer at that point, but I became very conscious about that. So I think I held on to that, and I still hold on to that till this day. But something that I think Sissy said earlier about the experiences, or you said that about the experience of being an actor, as opposed to being in the experience of a director or a producer. There also, when we are set in different roles, people's, people's interaction towards us, the way they deal with us, the way they treat us changes immediately. When I moved, I was on Fulbright studies over a year, and when I moved back to Pakistan, I actually wanted to be an actor. So, but the first opportunity I got was to become a director, do this project as a director on Pakistani television channel. I'm not going to name that channel. It was great. I was, well respected, and I would be there at the office till 3 in the morning. And there were some male, colleagues, bosses actually there who were, who enjoyed a very kind of a reputation in the industry for being, a womanizer or exploiting people for XYZ reason. I personally never felt that up till the point I was a director. And then came a time when I, resigned as a director, and I was like, maybe I want to just try and, pursue acting. Let's see how that goes. And because I was at a very good place where I could have gotten a very good opportunity to become an actor, so I reached out to the same boss to just tell him that I'm for some time taking a break from directing TV serials, and maybe I just want to, try and acting, so if there's an acting opportunity, I would love for you to consider me. The treatment changed overnight. And I was, there were some offers extended to me, for sexual favors in exchange of getting an opportunity in the acting arena, right? So that is where I realized, okay, people's reactions towards you really change depending on your roles as well. Having said that, that doesn't mean that in the role of a director or a producer, I didn't face my set of challenges. I did. And they were more nuanced. They were more subtle, right? Which, like Lizette said, that after some years pass, you start thinking, oh, it was happening because of this, right? They might not be so obvious in that moment. But there, I feel like gender is involved sometimes. But I've also found, men exploit me as much, or not if as much, but to a certain extent, even women, exploit me. And there are layers, right? There's gender, there are what role of the hierarchy you are at, what socioeconomic background you're coming with. Do you have people who you can, just name drop and say, oh, I have, that also brings some power to you, right? So what is that? I think that we accumulate with experience. So there's so many layers in the way, that determine how people are going to treat you. So just that. And in this, I guess, this rant, I completely forgot what was the original question. I'm so sorry.
No, that's quite all right. That's an interesting story about dealing with your first setback to what was natural confidence, and somebody wondering why you had that. Obviously, to him, it was surprising. So it's very good to hear that you were able to hold on to that and enthusiastically keep it, because I think for a lot of us, that's learned, and maybe not. Maybe a lot of women, we do have a lot of confidence as little kids. And then I feel like somewhere around puberty, when we start changing, we get treated differently. And maybe some of that carries over into adulthood, where you have to relearn confidence. But you raised another point, which is that just having a certain position gives you authority. And I think that's why, even though in my regular life, I'm not always, the loudest voice in the room, when I'm on set and I know that I'm director, and I have that position automatically, then I'm able to lean into that and express and use that confidence because I know I'm leading a team. You raised another interesting point in what you called the rant about what other privileges or what other factors play a role in how you're treated by other collaborators. And to lead back to my question about the industry, I think one factor we notice for sure is who gets to be a filmmaker at all depends a lot on whether you've had family support, whether you were allowed to do this in the first place, whether you came from a background where you had enough to eat, and then add to that whether you know people in the industry, whether you're an insider in some ways. So keeping all that in mind, if you can each speak a little bit to what you've noticed about your chosen industry when it comes to female filmmakers, whether you think there's genuinely been change and is going to be change, and any specific factors you've noticed that affect all of that. Maybe Cici, if you want to start, I know you know a little bit about the Italian industry and also quite a bit about Hollywood here in LA. So yeah, speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do think that there is a shift, there is a change that is happening, and there are more opportunities open to women. One of my recent director for hire jobs that I was hired for, basically the person who hired me pretty much told me, I was looking for female directors specifically this time around, because usually for our projects we have men, and I'm a woman.
And sorry, was that a woman who hired you or a man?
Yeah, it was a woman. And she was, and so she was like, yeah, I'm usually, we've had a lot of men working as directors in our shows, and then we want to bring in a woman. And I don't know, I felt like, maybe she came up with this idea because she was a woman, and a man wouldn't have necessarily thought of that. But I really appreciated I appreciated it. And it, obviously there's always like the other side of it where you're like, I don't want to get this job just because I'm a woman. And so it's like, it's a double-edged sword, I think. But I think that there's like enough of us women in this business at this point where you're not just getting the job just because of your gender. Like, you earned it, like you were, the best woman for this job at this particular time compared to other women that were competing against you. If it was a position for women only. But it's tough, it's tricky, because on the one hand, I definitely want to take advantage of this shift, like you said. I mean, it's an opportunity for women filmmakers, but I also don't want it to just be feeling like, oh, I'm just, the token woman female director who's just being used to, just because she's a woman and she's going to bring a female perspective. I don't know, it's just it's complicated. It's very, very complicated. But I think that like the important thing is that we're taking a first step towards change, and I definitely feel it also coming from a very patriarchal society back home. I feel that here things are a bit different. Yeah.
That's good to hear. I know exactly what you're talking about with not wanting to be the token woman or getting the job because you are a woman. And when that happens to me, which it does a lot, I think about the fact that there's an unspoken, well, you got this job because you were a guy for so long, just because that's who has been in the industry and who older men in positions of power have been comfortable giving jobs to. So in a way, I think as individuals, we can often feel tokenized, but if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, even if that's what someone else thinks is happening, or you have even thought is happening, at least you're in a position now to do a good job and prove otherwise. How about you, Lizette? What do you think of changes in the industry? What have you noticed of late?
Oh man, I don't know where to start. I definitely say that our industry looks hopeful just by seeing the products that are out there in cinemas and on streaming networks. There is more of a voice for women, so many more female directors that I'm seeing out there. So I want to say they're bringing a fresh perspective to the screen. And I'm glad to see that more opportunities are being given to women. I definitely understand that a lot of times I have heard conversations have come up where they're like, oh, they're just giving that job to that woman because she's just a woman and trying to fill a quota. And to that, I feel like we need to just have more jobs, try to create more stories that are worth telling, that can be told, not just from a woman's perspective, but just a human perspective. At the end of the day, man or woman, we're human. And we have our experiences to tell, and we have something to bring to the table, regardless of our gender. But I do think that we need to be able to give more opportunities to more women out there to be able to have the opportunity to tell their story. And then in regards to things that I think still need to be worked on from a production standpoint, I remember as a youth in high school, I went to interview an executive producer for the sports division at NBC. It was a great interview. It was for a paper that I needed to write for school. And I left there well, at first I was thinking I was going to leave there leaving on a positive note, but then she asked me the question of, do I expect to have a family or am I more career driven? Which I thought was a very strange question at the time. And I was like, I want both. I want a career and a family. And she basically told me I can't have both, that it's a very difficult ask to try to pursue both. And she had had a very hard time trying to have both. She had foregone a family, but she's very happy with her career, and that I should give it some serious thought if I really wanted a family, which was very strange to be told in high school by someone who I was hoping to kind of like role model, have as a role model to pursue this career. And I still think there is some changes. I've seen mobile childcare units on film sets that have the budget to afford that kind of luxury. And I've had talks with people who just have spitball ideas on what could we do to make working mothers on set something that's more consistently possible. Because in the freelance world, I still see women who, they get pregnant, they're in the freelance world, they take time off, and it's like they're forgotten, and they have a really hard time re-entering the freelance world, or alternatively, because they do not want to be forgotten, they will strive to work twice as hard, and they will call themselves the hustlers of the industry while breastfeeding and on a call and trying to keep working and do it all at the same time and saying that they're okay. But I can't help but wonder, are they really okay? And why should they have to be okay working twice as hard to try to have a family and continue to work in this industry? So that is one aspect that I wish I could say that more change could be made towards that, because I do think that it is worthy to pursue having a family and still be able to work within this industry. But I don't know that I've seen a lot of change in that respect, but I'd like to hope that there will be.
Right. And that points to a bigger issue with women in the industry, which extends to a lot of other industries, except that ours is crazy in terms of hours and commitment, right? Which is that there's a larger system at play that we all live in, and having families and taking care of them is still something that falls primarily on women. So unless and until industries step up and try harder to remove that as a barrier, we're still stuck with this problem, even if all else is equal. And the sad part is, I think a lot of industries would see having a mobile childcare unit as an accommodation, you know, as something they're going out of their way to do that might not otherwise be necessary. And so we're still stuck with that issue. Like life and this industry are not separate, the rest of the world and our cultural biases still. So yeah, things have to proceed sort of hand in hand. And, you know, the cool part of it is that we work in an industry where we can have an effect on changing minds. I like to see that silver lining. We can portray mothers differently. We can portray professional women who also happen to be mothers differently. But it's still, that's really interesting to know. And you raised a good point about freelance women as well, who don't have the benefit of these so-called accommodations. Where were we at? Did anyone else? Safia, have you already weighed in on trends in the industry? It would be cool to know if something specific is happening in the Pakistani industry, although I know you've had very international experiences as well. Speak to whatever you want.
Yes. I think I'm very hopeful. Having said that, women are still in the minority in the industry, but it is a bigger minority now in comparison to what it was in the past. And I think with the growth within the realms of women professionals, there comes more confidence, right, in women, because they know there are more of us out there. In Pakistan, what's really happening in the past couple of years is something really heartwarming when it comes to women filmmakers, women storytellers, women creatives. Often we see, what was happening in Pakistan was that women weren't expected to be technicians, right? Women weren't expected to be, they were yeah, you can go ahead and write, sure. Yeah, you can be a director if you want to. All right, sure. Producer, okay, that is also accepted. But camera person, no, sorry, women don't really. I've actually heard that from people who say, oh, I think men have better eyes when it comes to, frames and shots. So no, maybe women are probably not a good fit for it. Oh, I think men are better editors, when it comes to editing. So maybe women are not good fit for it. Women can go into art direction, acting, sure, direction, sure, production. Okay, all right. If you get a chance, if you're really confident and really, stepping up for yourself, sure, do all of that. But as of couple of years, I see that women are really giving each other these opportunities of, doing the camera work, of being editors. In fact, last year, and it's unfortunate because I was traveling for some more work, but a group of my, all female filmmakers, they got together and they decided all of them together are going to make one, a music video, right? So it was all women, producer, line producer, director, ADs, camera person, everything. And that got a lot of, clout on social media as well, because even right now in this day and age, this is an exception, like so many other exceptions that we're talking about that should be norm by now. There's still exceptions. They're act of rebellion. They're act of, look at us, we can do this. We're still trying to prove ourselves. But the attempts are being made, and that is amazing. So I think I'm pretty hopeful about that. As a female filmmaker, I also try to give a lot of, opportunities to, other females, not because they're females, but because they're creative, efficient, very, great filmmakers who deserve to get a chance. There's another layer to it, and I'm completely talking about it from the lens of South Asia and Pakistan. A lot of what we do, and in current day and age, and it's not just about industry, but I'm going to talk about industry, is centered around networking, right? Who are you meeting? Who are you networking with? That is where a lot of ideas are generated. That is where in those casual conversations you go like, oh, this is an amazing idea. Let's try and do something about it. Let's build a team. And in the bro culture in our, our part of the world, men have more avenues to do those kind of casual networking, right? They can go out and, Gayatri, you may be aware of this term dhabas, right? But for Lizette and Sissy, these are like these, think about coffee shops, tea shops, roadside tea shops, where Men can go out and sit, which is another, I don't want to get into another movement that's happening about women trying to reclaim the streets so that they can also get out. But men can easily go out and, sit on the corners of the street in their pajamas or shorts, and at any time of the day, middle of the night, grab, a cup of coffee or tea and just sit and chill, right? Nobody's going to question that. And it is a norm. As a woman, if I do, can I do that as a woman? I'm not going to say no, I can do that as a woman. But can I do that as freely as a man? Absolutely not. It is going to be an exception. It's not going to be a norm. I'm going to raise eyebrows, right? Some would be like really impressed by me. Some would be looking down upon me, right? And I don't want either of that. I want to be, as a female filmmaker, just be a norm. Go about, do my business while everyone else can do theirs. So networking is also a big issue, and women filmmakers in Pakistan, they're also thinking about this, right? In their own ways, they try to hold these little, get-togethers, these networking events in private spaces so that, we can come together and at least exchange ideas. So there is something to begin with. So I'm hopeful.
We're on the cusp of a lot of things. I think we have to take things into our own hands because, as you said, there are spaces that we're not the norm in. So even if somebody hasn't consciously thought women aren't wanted here, when a woman arrives, there's a different vibe. They're not used to it. They feel a bit strange. So it's a great metaphor for what we're all trying to do in our separate industries. But I love what you said about the music video and how these women are banding together, and also what you said about deliberately trying to hire female technicians, because I think that's still a universal issue in whichever industry. And, I think over my career as an indie filmmaker so far, I've worked with almost even numbers of either gender, but I do notice that one has to sometimes go out of one's way to seek out female DPs, and their names are not even shared as widely. It takes a little work to find them, but it's always worth it. Any last words from you guys on any of the topics so far? Anything you want to share? If nothing else, what do you have in the works?
Cece, you wanna go? I think I need a minute. No? I was just going to briefly say that I really am feeling hopeful in regards to women being able to vocalize their stories more in this industry. I do believe that if we help each other out, sometimes I do know that there can be, for lack of a better word, cattiness, but I do hope that we will continue to support each other as women, and that we'll keep helping each other rise up to keep bringing our voices out as loud as we possibly can to help our industry grow and help our voices grow. With that said, I am working and will continue to work in commercials and marketing because it's my bread and butter. But there is always that creative side of me that wants to do something more that has a social impact. And as far as like projects for the future, there are certain projects that I have in mind that are more geared towards children's animations or children's storytelling, because I would like to help other young women, young girls, not start out with the maybe lack of knowledge or experiences that I've had as a woman. Maybe have them have more confidence in that their voices are equally as important, and help promote their points of views and their I guess basically help them. I would like to help make sure that whatever project that I develop further that are aimed towards children and especially girls, help them develop further, so that they're not kind of in the same position that we as women necessarily started off with. They have a voice, they should use it. They have talent that is equal to or better than those of some men. And they are all equally creative in their own respects. And I just want to hope that we can help encourage that from all children, and encourage other little boys too, to make sure that they're not focusing on differences so much, and that they're kind of seeing the other women, because it's not just the little girls, it's also the little boys, and making sure that they grow up and view other women as equals in society outside of the industry as well.
Just some parting words from each of you, Cece and Safia, whoever wants to go first.
Should I say, like, should I talk about projects I'm working on, or just?
Well, let's get a quick word on both. What you think a call to action is for women in the industry, or the industry at large, with regards to getting women to be more and more a part of everything. And then tell us a little bit about what you have going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the call to action should just be to continue trying to support each other and use each other as collaborators, and discovering, you know, how we can all contribute creatively to each other's ideas, and but to also, I think, like what Lisette was saying, you know, we shouldn't be alienating anybody, and we have allies that aren't women. There are male allies that we can rely on and be able to recognize them. And again, like Lisette said, whenever there's behaviors that we want to call out, we should call them out. And I think that's really all we have to do, and continue working, continue making our stories, and never feeling like we don't matter enough to tell stories, and just don't give in to that like lack of self-esteem that unfortunately has been ingrained into a lot of us. As far as my projects, I have a few projects here and in Italy. I'm actually trying to make more Italian projects, so I miss my country, and I look forward to make more things over there. But that's it. Thank you so much for having me. This was really wonderful to hear from all of you, so thank you.
Thanks, Cece. Safia?
One can say so much, right? But I think as a parting thought, what I want to say is something for, you know, not just for women, but also for men across the board, more for women, is that one thing that I've learned, and I've been actively thinking about this, is one should try as much as one can to stay away from self-doubt. It is destructive, it is consuming, it's cruel, it's insensitive towards yourself. You have to be your biggest cheerleader. If you're not going to do that for yourself, nobody else is going to do that for you, because everyone's out there to, you know, prove their mettle. Everyone's out there to shine. You have to do that part of it for yourself to be able to shine. That is something, you know, and I know this because I experience it too. It's easier said than done. So one has to remind that to oneself every day, that I'm worth it. What I'm thinking can happen. I have stuff to offer, and I must do everything I can to offer it to people. Let it be other people's job to doubt you if they want to, but work on yourself, work on your craft, and do not doubt yourself even for a second. As far as what I'm working on is concerned, I cannot talk about any project in particular, but something what Lisette said, you know, I really resonate with that. I'm also trying to do a lot of commercials as I work on my, you know, documentary, passion documentary idea. It's in the works, but it is sometimes, you know, the commercials that become your bread and butter, and then you make documentaries for passion. So, you know, money's needed. So some commercial work happening for a lot of people, and just seeing how I can be of service to, you know, others using my creative juices.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for your time and your wonderful perspectives and points. I'll let you go now, but this should go up, I think, on the 8th, and it's been really, really good to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. Thank you so much, Lizette. Thank you so much, Ceci. It was amazing
Of
talking to all
course.
of you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.